It is time now to hear from Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. He's in conversation with President and Vice Chair of Microsoft, Brad Smith. To introduce them, please welcome Managing Director for Microsoft New Zealand, Vanessa Sorenson.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Vanessa Sorenson, the Managing Director of Microsoft New Zealand, and welcome to the APEC 2021 CEO Summit. It is an honour today to introduce the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, in conversation with Microsoft President Brad Smith. The 30th Prime Minister of Australia is no stranger to the APEC host nation, having worked as a Director of the New Zealand Office of Tourism and Sport from 1998 to 2000. In fact, I was thrilled to learn that the Prime Minister's maternal grandmother was indeed born in New Zealand. But of course, his Australian heritage is also strong. He was the Managing Director of Tourism Australia from 2004 to 2006, before being elected as a member of the Australian Parliament in 2007. And following the 2013 election, Mr. Morrison was appointed Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Mr. Morrison served as Social Services Minister and later Treasurer, before taking on the top job in 2018 and winning what many considered an unwinnable election in 2019. Since his time as Prime Minister, he has led Australia through the global pandemic, with more than 80% of Australia's population now vaccinated against COVID-19. Australia's economy is well positioned coming out of the pandemic, with the OECD predicting Australia's economy will continue to grow in 2021 and throughout 2022. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the Honourable Scott Morrison, Prime Minister of Australia, in conversation with Microsoft President Brad Smith.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with Prime Minister Scott Morrison from Australia today. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Brad, and kia ora to everybody in New Zealand and everyone joining us for this important session. Very happy to be here.
Prime Minister Morrison, I think one thing that's apparent to somebody like me who has the opportunity to work on a global basis on technology is that Australia has become such a global leader. I think the country has become a global leader in the use of technology, the growth of the tech sector, as well as really in some ways defining the next frontier in legislating and regulating technology. You have the critical infrastructure regulation, the news media bargaining code. You remain on the forefront of protecting consumers and addressing competition issues through the ACCC. I thought I might start with a question that captures all of that. As you have needed to lead the government and address such a variety of issues and factors, how have you sought to prioritize issues and just to balance all of the societal interests that are at stake here?
Well, look, thanks for the question. It's a very practical response that we've had here in Australia. We recognise the massive opportunities and that can be delivered, obviously, through digital platforms and digital technology. That's a no-brainer. And that section of our economy is growing 4 times faster than the rest. So it's obviously an important source of income and wealth and jobs for our country. And we embrace it 100%. And we have the goal of being one of the top 10 digital economies in the world by 2030. But when you're looking at your digital sector, it has developed well ahead of where the regulatory settings have been. And we have a very simple rule. The rules that apply in the real world should apply in the digital world. So whether that's antitrust or whether that's consumer protection, whether it's paying tax, whether it's respecting content and all of those sorts of issues. I mean, we can't treat the digital world like it's the Wild West and it's a lawless space. And you can't have business models which depend on it being that either. And so the way we approach it is to set that up as a very clear rule. If you can't do it in the real world, you shouldn't be able to do it in the digital world. But equally, if you can trade in the real world, you should be able to trade in the digital world. If you can share information in the real world, you should be able to do it in the digital world as well. And so it really is about a process of modernising and bringing up to speed all of our rules that weren't written for a digital world and making sure that they're relevant in one. Now, we think it's very important, as I know you know at Microsoft and others we work with, whether it's Google or whoever, Facebook or the many others who are involved, Amazon, it's important that those who are creating this digital world are part of that process. Because if you just leave it to governments to do it, well, they'll stuff it up because they don't understand it the same way. And I think there's always been a lot of benefit in a regulatory partnership, which sees these rules that are put in place, which get the best out of digital platforms, but also don't let those digital platforms operate with a free kick, i.e. different to what would happen in the normal real world. So that's how we approach it. It's just a very practical project. And so whether that's our Online Safety Act, as you said, the Media Bargaining Code, or making sure that companies pay tax and where IP is recognised, and all of these are just practical issues. They're not ideological questions. They're just straightforward technical issues that need to be resolved. They're better resolved in partnership, because if they're not, governments will just do it anyway. And when we will do it, we won't do it as well as I think we possibly can. And each time we've done this now, I think it's got better and better and better because the partnership has got better. I think the sector hasn't resisted these things as much as it frankly did originally. And business models now, I think, are taking into account a broader accountability and responsibility for the safety of the digital world in which citizens, and particularly Australian citizens, reside.
Well, at the same time that you've been moving forward with this legal framework, the tech sector in the Australian economy has continued to grow. It's been an interesting, as you said, you want to be a top 10 digital economy by 2030. I think you might achieve that result well ahead of 2030. What I find interesting in part is when you look at the Australian economy today, the two largest sectors are financial services and mining. That's probably not surprising to people who follow Australia. But technology is now the third largest sector in the economy. When you just take stock of what the Australian economy has been doing in recent years, to what do you attribute that rapid growth?
Well, getting it, one. Understanding that that's where the world's heading and being very practical about our response. And the responses aren't just what we've just been talking about in the regulatory space. I mean, if I go back to what we've been doing in fintech, and when I was the treasurer, we created the regulatory sandbox, which was enabling, the developers to be able to operate and try new products and get them to a point. It's very frustrating, I think, in the tech sector where the regulation can kill a venture before it even gets out of the ground, basically. And so creating that space and that room for innovation and the technology to be able to flourish. In addition to that, I think it's about getting the right skill sets in place. We are investing a lot in the digital skills of our population and of our workforce. It's one of those critical skill sets that we want in our workforce. And it really doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether you're in the manufacturing industry, the services industry, or even the high-tech sector itself. These critical skills, whether at a vocational level or a high-end level in our universities, where we're looking to, make advances in critical technologies like AI and so on, we need the high-end skills. But basically, your population needs those skills. Australians are actually quite good at applying technology. Kiwis are the same. We develop quite a bit ourselves, that's true, but much of it is developed elsewhere. The real value comes, as you guys know at Microsoft, is when you apply it to problems, apply it to businesses, get it utilised within your small business sector in particular. I mean, take this for example. I mean, we've put in place our payments platform now, which is 24/7. And one of the most important things for financial architecture is to ensure you can get immediate payment. Now, if you're a small business and you don't have to wait 7 days to get paid, your cash flow world completely changes. All of your financial risks change. Everything that you can potentially do changes. Something as simple as that infrastructure investment, which is similarly what we're doing with the national broadband network, which is rolled out right across the country now. And the other thing I'd add to this, in addition to the infrastructure, is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity now is more important than ever. All systems are vulnerable both to criminal actors, state actors. This is the real world of cybersecurity, and for it to be successful, people have to feel very safe in there from a commercial point of view. And we've always given that a very high priority as a government, not just for our own systems, but to ensure we're working with our corporate sector to ensure that they can have confidence about their cybersecurity systems.
Why don't we pick up on that last theme for a moment, because you have been, and the whole government has been so focused on cybersecurity, including in the context of supply chains. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're aiming to accomplish when you're thinking about the resilience and security of supply chains for technology and what that means to Australia?
Well, you've just hit it on the head. Security and resilience. I mean, that's what it's about. And Narendra Modi is often, quote him often on this. So supply chains used to be about cost and efficiency. And that is still true. But he says now more than ever, they're about trust. And that trust is about who you're doing business with. And we've learnt that during this pandemic. Trusted supply chains are frankly more valuable to you than some that might actually be a bit cheaper, because you know they'll always be there. And the resilience of those supply chains, yes, it requires their digital security, but it also means that there is a like-mindedness between partners now that is probably more important than ever. Those supply chains, yes, they have to be resilient. Yes, they have to be secure, but they also have to be competitive. And what I mean by that, particularly in the rare earths and critical mineral sector, we discussed this at the summit which President Biden pulled together at the end of the G20 in Rome just last week. And both Canada and Australia were making these points very, very strongly. Justin and I were making these points that, the critical minerals, rare earths supply chain and what it feeds into with the new energy technologies and what will take the world towards net zero at the moment is very dependent on largely one supplier, which has the ability to apply a lot of monopolistic power to prevent other supply chains being developed. Now, Australia feels very strongly about ensuring that the alternative supply chains around rare earths and critical minerals can be developed and support whole new lists of customers that operate at various points down the chain. And this is something we've been championing through the Quad, together with Australia, the United States, Japan and India, 4 countries that between us can encompass entire supply chains, particularly in the technology and clean energy supply chain space. And so that is a very important project for us. We all have different roles to play in it, and ensuring that we can build that up over time. We'd love to see European economies become part of that as well. I've discussed it in the past with President Macron, for example. And so whether it's in the UK or across in Europe, we do see real opportunities to develop these alternative supply chains, because it also feeds not just in sort of digital technologies, but it plays a huge role, obviously, in the new energy technologies as well. And early next year, we're hosting through the Quad a clean energy supply chain summit in Australia. And that's not about getting politicians together. They get together often enough through APEC and all the other events. This is about getting the scientists, the technologists, the entrepreneurs, the industrialists. Yeah, there'll be a few of us there too, but there'll be regulators there as well. And getting those minds in a room about where we can actually develop these partnerships for these supply chains to be durable, resilient, trusted and secure, and most of all, competitive.
Let's, if we could, build a little bit more on that looking forward. Obviously, the world's not yet out of COVID, but I think around the world, people are increasingly looking beyond it. They're talking about what needs to come next. Technology played a role during the pandemic of just sort of sustaining economic activity. When you look at Australia's economy and the country's needs, say a year or two from now, post-pandemic, are there new or different challenges we're all going to need to talk about? Is the role of technology going to need to adapt in any particular way to help support that?
The short answer is yes, but the short answer to that question is always yes, I think, regardless of what's occurred. During the pandemic, our digital pathway just accelerated like most, I think, advanced economies around the world. There'd always been a bit of a resistance, not through anything other than people were comfortable with the way, they were doing their books, the way they were invoicing, the way they were talking to their customers. There was a familiarity to do that, particularly in the SME sector. Enter COVID. The only way you can talk to people then is on a digital platform. And so businesses, radically changed their business models overnight to survive. And that has caused an innovation in the application of technology to so many businesses in Australia and really given us a very strong leap forward in this space. Similarly for consumers. The amount of retail and so on, which is now being done through parcels and posts, in the United States, that's already been happening for some time. But that really has come on very strongly here. And so, the role of big distribution centres and the technology that support those and how that feeds in, operating in real time. And, the competition is now on is how quickly can you get it from, the click to the front door. That's all happening now in Australia. And that's, I think, good for our economy because it's challenging our economy and our business models. Then you've got the consumer interface with this. One of the disturbing and distressing parts of the pandemic is because all of our kids have been online, doing school and frankly just catching up with their friends and doing all of those sorts of things. The presence of criminal behaviour online and predators and all of this actually is accelerated also. The crooks are just as good as applying technology as anyone else. And we've seen that in this country, as we've seen it in all countries. And that's why our regulatory systems and our protection systems really have to kick in and go to a whole nother level. And that's where I do really appeal to the digital platforms and the sector themselves. We remember after Christchurch, the terrible events there with the massacre. And I took a proposal to the G20 following that, and of course there was the Christchurch call led by Prime Minister Ardern together with President Macron, and the digital platforms have responded to that. And they do have the technological capabilities, I think, to prevent the digital platforms, the internet being used as a weapon for terrorists, but we need to now make sure that it's not being used as a tool for people to harass people, to exploit people, to intimidate people. We're seeing this more and more, the impact on the mental health of our young people through cyberbullying and cyber abuse. And there are two key issues here, I think. The first one is to recognise that, digital platforms are publishers. And the second one is free speech only works in a free society where there is an anonymity. Free speech isn't about to say whatever you want and not be accountable for it. That's the whole point of free speech. So whatever you like in our country, but you're accountable for what you say. And we can't have digital platforms providing a shield for people to engage in online abuse, because if we allow that to happen, digital platforms will not be a safe space for consumers, for our children. We won't get the right outcomes on it, on education and skills development and the broader, commercial opportunities that are there. So we all have to work, I think, even more closely together to make the digital world safe. And that's not just about hacking and cybersecurity. That's about the interactions of people online. And we don't think those rules are tough enough. And we are moving forward on that. Online privacy for young people. Young people, particularly children, shouldn't be able to have their data used in such a way where they can be targeted. And we all know how the algorithms work. Adults are different. Kids need protection. So they're the challenges I think we have. To have an environment that keeps the world safe online, just like, as I started out saying, they're the rules that exist in the real world. They should exist online too.
Well, I know we're now coming to a close, so I want to say thank you, but I think you've just laid out in such an exceptional way a framework for all of us to think about. We're accelerating the use of technology. As you put it, it's not just about development, but it's about deployment. It's about applying technology. And that really requires that we learn from the pandemic. As you said, invest in the digital skills for people, stimulate its use, make sure it's subject to the rule of law, that we have supply chain resilience and trust, and that we keep people safe. So I think in short order, you've given us a lot of the formula that we're all going to need to talk even more about. So thank you. Certainly, from my perspective and on behalf of Microsoft, it's a real privilege to have the opportunity to talk.
Well, you guys are a great partner, and I appreciate the work you do with us as well. And because government has to do their bit too. And we've learnt that in the pandemic as well. You know, everything from downloading your digital vaccination certificate to your scanning codes when you're going into restaurants. You know, the government has been doing its bit, ensuring that we're delivering more of our services directly, which is a way of getting your whole population digital. So it's the big challenge, but I think it's going to mean a lot for all of our economies, and I'm very pleased it's on the APEC agenda. Thanks for the chat.
Good. Thank you. Thank you again.
Te mihi ki o tātou kai kōrero. Our thanks to Brad Sorenson from Microsoft and, of course, Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, who typically and characteristically was pretty straight up there. And I think Brad stole my thunder because it was an exceptional discussion, particularly around the legal framework, the digital legal framework. That sentence that Scott Morrison mentioned about rules in the real world should apply to the rules. Those rules should be applied in the digital world as well.
Yeah, Australia has taken a really firm position on this over the last 18 months or so, and I think it's probably most eloquently articulated in the words of Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Free speech only works in a free society, and he's straight up and he's blunt about it, even when speaking to someone like Brad Smith from Microsoft, when he says these big technology companies are publishers. That's it. They aren't just disseminators of information. They are publishers, and as publishers, they have a responsibility. And I think so much when we are considering the challenges and the complexities of the digital world and some of the ethical conundrums that the digital revolution puts before us, it's easy to get really complicated. It's easy to think about things in esoteric or theoretical forms, but actually, if you strip it back and treat the digital world just as we treat other, innovative sectors, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, actually, Brad Smith, so from Microsoft, who in his summing up mentioned a couple of things which are really important. One of the comments, obviously, that Scott Morrison mentioned was that, digital platforms, yes, they're publishers, but they have to be accountable, which is the point I think you were talking about there, but also about the fact that the digital platforms can't just be a shield for people to engage in online abuse, particularly when it comes to protection of rangatahi, of youth, and that obviously follows on from what we saw here in New Zealand 2019, March 15.
Yeah. Some interesting comments sharing those thoughts on our digital platform. Scott Morrison identified two key principles in controlling potential harm from digital platforms. One, digital platforms are publishers. Two, free speech only works in a free society where there isn't anonymity, and that's a critical point with this. It's not about being able to say what you want and not being held accountable for it. Government and digital companies must work hand in hand to ensure the digital world is safe, and I know that the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison will have a lot of support, at least with that comment.
I think he also mentioned right at the top that governments will impose regulation by themselves, but without partnership with the sector, and if they do that, they will mess it up, which again, straight up, and talking about the cooperation and the participation and engagement that's required between governments and business, which has been reinforced through some of the other presentations, through some of the other speakers that we've heard from this morning.
Yeah, this is the whole purpose of the 2021 APEC CEO Summit. We want to bring together people with experience and authority in different worlds so that they can coordinate to make for a better world. And this is the great thing about the summit this year. We're bringing together, experts and leaders in governance and expert and leaders in business, so that those sectors can work together and actually make for a better world. Really interesting as well to hear some of the comments on small businesses. Thank you for the message. Great to hear SMEs, as in small to medium enterprises, referenced earlier in the economic panel. They make up 98% of all businesses and are critical to a successful future. And Scott Morrison, of course, made a similar point. One of the real values of technology is in its application. So it's all well and good having technology, but technology only gets its true value once you are able to apply it to something. And I think anyone who has experience in an SME or has friends or whānau, family members in SMEs, will know that over the last 18 months there has been all sorts of opportunity for SMEs to begin applying some of that technology in their day-to-day operations, and that many SMEs, although this has been a challenging time for businesses, have found that has benefited their businesses in ways they never thought imaginable.
Absolutely. We also have one more comment and then I'll throw, which was just very clear about the fact that we also need to address digital inclusion as a part of this conversation as well, which was mentioned. So thank you for your comments. We'd also like to thank our premier partners for helping to make this year's APEC CEO Summit possible. Thank you very much to PwC, knowledge partner of the 2021 APEC CEO Summit, and joined by additional premier partners Contact Energy, Fonterra, Microsoft and Westpac New Zealand. Thank you also to our international media partners Bloomberg, Time and CNBC.
We wish we could have you all here in person. Unfortunately, that isn't possible for this year's APEC 21 CEO Summit. However, we will be continuing all sorts of interesting conversations throughout the next couple of days. It's time now to hear from one of our sponsors, Fonterra.
Ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. If we care for the land will care for us. Mother Nature gave us this fertile green earth and clear blue water to provide fresh, healthy food for us to eat and a clean, safe environment for us all to live. We love this land and are committed to nurture and protect it so it remains as Mother Nature intended. For generations, our farmer families have created their dairy goodness the natural way to help balance the natural resources of the land. On our farms, cows are free to roam and graze on the lush pasture all year round, helping them live long, healthy lives. This land is blessed with an abundance of rainfall and sunshine, and our nutrient-rich grass grows all year round. Nothing we grow contains GMOs. It's not in our nature. Each Fonterra farm is developing its own environmental plan to help improve water quality, carbon emissions, and biodiversity. And most of their electricity comes from renewable sources. Today, our on-farm carbon footprint is one of the lowest in the world. We're proud of that, but we're working towards a low-carbon future. All this adds up to dairy goodness that could only come from New Zealand. Our milk is rich in nutrients, and our butter has a unique golden colour due to its high content of healthy beta-carotene. And our quality standards are world-class, so you can trace your milk and butter right back to where it came from. Mother Nature entrusted us with this beautiful land. Today it's our home, our spirit, our legacy. And at Fonterra, we want to make her proud by keeping this land well for generations to come.
Kia ora. APEC 2021 has been an extraordinary journey, delivered in extraordinary times. With the challenges that our economies face, we are firm believers that more than ever, collaboration is required to succeed. This has been our theme for the year. Join, work, grow together. Haumi hui Tāiki. These words describe the collaborative effort our ancestors drew on as they worked together to build our great ocean voyaging vessels called waka. Building a waka required entire communities to work in harmony toward a common goal. Whilst their goal was to build a waka, ours is to rebuild from the worst pandemic we've known. More than ever, working together is required. That same idea of together is expressed in our tohu, or symbol for APEC 2021. Our tohu draws on the concept of ngā haue whā, which translates to the four winds. The wind from the north, known as hauraki. The wind from the west, we call hauāuru. And from the east is marangai. The wind from the south we call hautonga. The four winds, all from different directions, come together. Ngā hauewhā is symbolic of being a meeting place for all peoples, from everywhere, to be unified, to be together, to be connected. For APEC 2021, we welcome our colleagues from the north, from the south, from the east, and from the west, to join, work, grow. And so our tohu is a form of welcome as we metaphorically journey from different parts of the Pacific to meet, to be together. Join, work, grow together. Haumi hui Tāiki.
Controlled environment agriculture is indoor farming, so it could be what they call a high tunnel, or it could be in a greenhouse, or it could be an indoor farm under lights. WayBeyond's vision is to transform agriculture towards digital farming, leveraging the power of data to make farming more sustainable. Collaboration is a really key theme. It's going to take all of us working together to try and solve all these really big problems around how we feed everybody.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm Maya, your digital host at the APEC CEO Summit. I was created by Soul Machines. To talk more about the incredible work Soul Machines is doing, I'm thrilled to announce our co-founder, Greg Cross.
Thanks for the great introduction, Maya. Maya is an example of some of the incredible work that we're doing here at Soul Machines. She's this incredible hyper-realistic CGI character that is being brought to life in a completely new way. We started Soul Machines in 2016. It was co-founded by Dr. Mark Sager, who is an incredible award-winning Hollywood animator and researcher, and myself. But the history of the company goes back a little bit further than that to 2012, when Mark set up a research lab at the University of Auckland and brought together this amazing team of researchers, scientists, neuroscientists, psychologists, developmental psychologists, biomechanical engineers who started this multidisciplinary work on how we could humanize artificial intelligence, how we could use artificial intelligence to animate digital people and digital characters for the world of the future that we're creating. A world where, as we're already seeing, the concept of machine and human collaboration and machine and human cooperation, these core themes which are becoming more and more important to us. We live in an infinitely more digital world today. The world was already becoming more and more digital before the pandemic, before COVID came along and changed our lives and the way we do business and disrupted in such a major way. So, as this world is becoming more digital, it's also becoming more transactional. More and more of our business, more and more of our interactions with our customers are now being transacted using digital platforms. In this world in which we live in, brand connections are the ultimate establishment of the way in which we deliver value to our customers. It's the way in which we create experience for our customers. And in a more transactional world, that becomes infinitely more difficult. We're bringing our digital people to life in exactly the same way that you and I are being animated. We're being animated, we're being brought to life by our brain. Our digital people, when they interact with you, are being brought to life by their brain and the knowledge that they have been trained with and the content they have been provided with in order to perform the roles that you would like them to perform in your organisation. So we've done a lot of incredible work with some of the biggest brands in the world to help them think about the way in which our digital workforce can help their brands provide personal connections 24/7 at an infinite scale in a way that has never ever been possible. And we're doing work with people like SK2 and Procter & Gamble to create these amazing brand connections inside of their e-commerce stores. With Nestle, creating a digital cookie coach, to create that brand connection, that brand experience, that work with me connection in an incredibly digital way. As we're 2 years into this pandemic, or we're coming up for 2 years into this pandemic, what we've seen is a tremendous shift in the way in which we think about delivering health services and education to our kids using digital platforms. And this is where a digital workforce can make an infinite, incredible difference to the way in which we democratise the delivery of healthcare and education to communities everywhere, all over the world. And this is really, really important. And we started this work actually as a result of COVID-19. Our first big push into the world of healthcare was with the World Health Organization, bringing digital Florence to life as a healthcare worker. Florence has gone on to become an integral part of the anti-tobacco or smoking cessation world of in this post-COVID-19 era. So, this is not something that is just part of COVID-19, but this is something that we've learned about how we can deliver healthcare going forward. We've created Maya in conjunction with Maryville University in the United States of America. Maryville are about reinventing the way in which they deliver college education to students all over the world. They're able to provide the same level of interaction on their digital campus as they're able to deliver on their real world campus. 5 years at Soul Machines, we've been lucky to attract some of the most amazing and supportive AI, artificial intelligence, VCs and investors on the planet. They've enabled us to grow our company exponentially over the last 5 years. We're now providing our digital people literally around the world in a dozen different languages.
It's not every day we get such a fantastic opportunity to be part of building the future.